Hello and welcome to the LifeWorks podcast. Joining me today is Connell Cuffie. Connell is the founder of Proceed to Lead and the founder of the Light the Fire conference, something that I had the great privilege to be a part of. Connell, it's great to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me, Mark. I appreciate the invite.
I want to kick off with an interesting question. And we were just talking about it. And we were talking about bad leadership. And this is one of the problems I think that you're trying to solve. But tell me about bad leaders. What do they look like?
They look like you and me, honestly. You don't know a bad leader until you see what they produce. And we have a huge issue with retention in this country right now. We see it with this great exodus of people leaving the workforce, or so they say. I'm not sure how true those numbers are at this point, but we see a lot of people exiting the workforce because their leaders or their managers, as you want to call it, aren't doing a good job of either replicating themselves in a good way. They don't take the time to build relationships with their people, and they don't put their people above the results, the arbitrary goals, I could say, to steal something from Simon Sinek. A lot of the times, managers and bad leaders are so focused on hitting targets that they leave their people behind. And that's not something that's really going to help further the business in the long run. I think bad leaders, like I said, the byproduct of their bad leadership is a lack of retention and really a lot of disgruntled followers. That's how you can recognize one. Because other than that, you have no idea whether they're a good leader or a bad leader.
So let's take the same question and flip it on its head. So tell us what a good leader looks like.
Okay. A good leader is somebody that is really adept at understanding and moving at the pace of their people. A good leader is someone who is committed to the long-term gains of their followers and not the short-sighted gains of the objective. A good leader is somebody that builds up other leaders behind them. A good leader is somebody where, and I always say this joke like with my team, I say, if I get hit by a bus, nothing should change. As far as the operations, as far as the culture goes, nothing should change. So a good leader is able to create a culture in which they are not the lid or the cap to the ability of their people. They're more of a conduit. So their people are doing the work. Their people are the ones making the gains and accelerating, and they're there just to guide that funnel. They're the walls. If you go to a bowling alley and you see the little kids, everybody's aiming for the same 10 pins, but you have these guardrails up for these little kids and their ball's going to bounce left and right, but the guardrails are there to keep everybody moving forward. And I think a great leader does a good job of allowing people to bounce off the walls a little bit, but still moving towards the goal, which is to hit a strike.
So you started this organization called Proceed to Lead. What was the problem that you were trying to solve? What are you hoping to accomplish with it? What's your kind of broad objective?
Gotcha. So Proceed to Lead was really a brainchild of myself and a couple of my coworkers at Leidensburg Cinemas. Now, I'll give you a little bit of backstory. When I was working for Jersey Mike's, I was the director of training and philanthropy. And I started this program called 15 Feet of Better Business, where I had local leaders go into the high schools and speak to the business classes and things like that about leadership, business, the college-bound experience, and all those other things. And when my wife and I left the DC area, I didn't have anyone in place to keep running that program. So it fell to the wayside, and it was weighing on my heart because I knew that it was a really good program because there were a lot of kids that learned a lot of lessons, learned about budgeting, learned about finance, learned about how to get into college the right way and not be in piles of debt when you walk out of it. Kids learning about leadership. And I wanted to do something close to that in this area where I live in the tri-state for West Virginia, Maryland, and Virginia. While I was working at Leidensburg, I talked to some of my leadership team and I said, hey, how do you guys feel about us doing something where we can get all the local leaders to come together to connect, inspire, and empower the community? Because whether you're 18 or you're 45, you can glean something from a leader. And I really want us to build a culture of leaders in this area. So we all sat down and we talked about it, and we were like, hey, why don't we do a leadership development event? That's how Light the Fire was actually created. And just to get real with you, Proceed to Lead came about after I got laid off from that job. And I got laid off from that job because the heads that be were looking at the finances. And even though we were the number one theater in the market, we were beating all of our competition, they made a financial decision. And because I was the highest paid employee, they said, hey, we can pay an assistant manager to do his job for far less money. So they made that call. And you know what? It is what it is. It hurt when it happened because I thought to myself, man, I've made myself expendable by training up my team. I had that in the plan, right? And I used to always joke about that. I would always say to them, hey, if I get fired, you guys are still going to be okay. And then lo and behold, it actually happened. Who would have thought, right? But it was a really weird situation that happened for me because I was like, oh my gosh, I invested so much of my time and my passion and my heart into this organization just to be let go because of a financial reason. And during the 2 weeks after I got laid off, I was talking to my friend Kelsey, and she is very much a straight shooter. And she was actually one that helped me get the job at the theater to begin with. So it was ironic that was our conversation, but she was like, now it's time for you to pursue your own thing. So I talked to her about it, and Proceed to Lead came out of the whole idea of just creating a program where we're still getting leaders to come down to the grassroots level and being able to connect with people where they are. Because I think that's an issue right now, is that we have these leaders up here that want to connect, but there's no conduit for them to connect. So Proceed to Lead is hopefully that conduit for people to get those leadership connections that they need, and for these leaders that are sitting there wanting to replicate themselves to just be able to do so in a very natural way. It's ever evolving now, just to be honest with you. My target audience would be 18 to 45, but what I'm seeing now is that there's a lot more opportunity with the younger people now. So who knows, but I'm willing to talk to anybody about leadership. I'm obsessed with leadership and the concepts behind it. And I have some great mentors that are also obsessed with leadership. You met one of them. But yeah, it really is. It's about teaching people the concepts of leadership, getting them to understand the basics of it. And for me, the basis of leadership is relationship building. Great orators are masters of storytelling. Great leaders are masters at relationship building. And if we can teach people how to master relationship building, we're going to foster an amazing generation of leaders who will continue that mold and that trend in the future.
There's so much to unpack in some of the things that you said just a moment ago. I want to go back to when you got laid off, and I had a similar experience in 2020. And something that just occurred to me just a moment ago as you were talking is that you and I did exactly the same things before we got laid off. We did all the right things, said all the right things, raised up leadership. I made myself obsolete. And I wonder if on some level, by doing so, got to as far as we could in that organization. Do you know what I mean? We got to the ceiling of that organization for what that organization could do to support us. Because then beyond that, where else were you going to go? What other opportunities would have been available to you? Like when you get to the top of the pyramid, it gets considerably smaller at the top. And then when you're right there and you already have leadership, and of course, your company and my company made exactly the same decision, right? You're like, we could just get somebody to do it cheaper.
Yeah.
If you want Neiman Marcus quality, you've got to pay Neiman Marcus prices. You really do get what you pay for, especially in the job economy. So I wonder if on some level, you and I went as far as we could go, and us getting laid off was perhaps the providential gift that we received to move us on to better things. And I can say for myself that I landed in better places, and I know that you have.
Absolutely. And the thing about it is, it's okay to feel the hurt. And that's the thing that I learned through this whole experience is no matter what you do, whether you do everything right or you do everything wrong, there's going to be some level of life that happens. And I have this saying where life happens in between the happy moments, right? And that's something that you have to embrace. And you either get up and keep going, or you sit down and you say, I give up. And at some point, it's not worth it anymore. But for me, especially having a family. I'm like, I got to get up and keep going. I can't afford to just sit on my laurels and feel bad for myself. I have to produce. And here's something about that word produce. I think that's why a lot of young people nowadays are suffering with depression and mental health issues, because we live in a society where the idea of producing for the greater society is no longer the focus. Everyone is so focused on their identity, who they inherently are, that they've forgotten that they need to produce for the group. And there is joy that comes when you produce. There is satisfaction that comes when you produce. When you're only focused inwardly all the time, there's no escape from that, right? You start to cannibalize yourself. Your mind starts to cannibalize itself because there's no outreach there. And I went through that for a little bit of time. I went through that pseudo depression stage going through, and I was like, oh my gosh, like my job was my value. My job was my worth. And then I realized, no, I can still produce things. Like I don't need an employer, and I'm employed now, but I don't need an employer to tell me that I can produce on my own. I say on my own, no one's an island, right? But I can produce. And the idea was like, I'm going to produce. I'm not just going to sit on my butt and worry about Connell. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to produce something. Proceed to Lead is my way of not only adding to other people, but it's also my way of producing something. And the cool thing is, when I look at like the fire, whether it's a great success or not, something was produced. And I can look back at that and be like, look, all that hard work still produced something, and it's going to leave something behind for people. I'm working on a book right now, and who knows when I'll finish it, but I'm producing something that will hopefully leave something behind that my kids can point to, my kids' kids can point to and say, our dad, our grandfather, our great-grandfather produced something that hopefully challenges people and hopefully impacts the world far beyond what my individual self can muster. As you see my cat back there.
Love it.
But I think that's a major issue that people are going through right now, is we are so internally focused. And leaders can't afford to be internally focused. Leaders must always be focused on the people that they're leading. And we should always be not only helping them produce, but also producing for them at the same time. Sorry to go off on that little tangent there, but I think humans are designed for community and for production. And we're missing both of those when we focus only on ourselves.
That's really beautifully said. I think you and I talked about this actually at the conference, where we talked about the criticality of purpose. And as you put it, production is a means for us to have purpose. And we need purpose, because when we don't have purpose, that's just not a good recipe. Left to our own thoughts, our own devices, without any purpose, without any community, that is a recipe for disaster and mental health disconnection there.
That's why America is so medicated, and it's sad. And I would love to be part of that group of people that creates a new way of thinking. I can't even say new, because it's not new, right? It's a known thing. It's just, it's been lost. And I think you're doing a good job of being a part of that conversation too, Mark. So keep on fighting the good fight and helping people produce. And I'm grateful to be a part of that conversation too.
Thank you for that. And thank you for being a part of my production.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah. People will be able to watch this as long as those platforms are alive, or we have the capabilities. But what you're doing with the LifeWorks podcast is something that you are leaving behind proof of your existence, but you're producing with that. And that's a huge thing. That is such a beautiful example of how you can use your blip of time to leave that ripple for other people. That's what it's all about.
Thank you, Connell. That's very kind. I appreciate that. So I want to shift a little bit toward some general questions. If you could share one secret of your success, what would that be?
One secret of my success. It's my inability to not care about what other people think. I know that's a bad way of saying it, but my wife tells me this all the time, that I willingly put myself in uncomfortable situations. And she doesn't understand why I do that to myself or how I can do that. But I do. I believe in order for me to grow as a person, I need to be able to step out of my shell and do something once in a while that doesn't feel good. For example, 3 years ago, me being on your podcast would have been like, oh no, not me. I'm not the right person for this. I'm on the broadcast team as a host for my church, and that's not my normal personality, right? I'm more of a behind the scenes, in the shadow, influencing person. And I've had to get comfortable being in front of a camera, right? When that red light comes on, I'm no longer thinking, oh my gosh, I'm thinking, all right, let's do this. And that was a total shift in my brain. Starting a leadership conference, total place of discomfort. Being asked to be in leadership at my church, total place of discomfort, right? So I am constantly saying yes to the things that put me in an uncomfortable situation with the hopes that it'll help me grow later on. I hope that answers your question, but that's just who I am. And I wasn't always this person. I learned this from another mentor of mine. He would always challenge us to be in uncomfortable situations, and he did it himself. I was like, this guy's doing it the right way, and I want to know, what is he doing? And he talked to me about it. And here I am several years later imitating that. And I've gotten comfortable with the discomfort, if that makes any sense. But yeah, I typically will say yes to an uncomfortable thing because in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, this is going to help me grow and get better. And I'm not ashamed to tell people this. I would love to be a billionaire one day, right? It's written on my board. That's one of my goals. And in order to be a billionaire, you have two pathways you can go. This guy that I follow named Officer Tatum on YouTube, he says you can either affect 1 billion lives or you can go the route of making $1 billion. And I want to do both. But in order to do that, I can't be the Connell that I am today because I have to be a different version of myself to get there. So every single day I need to do something that is outside of who I naturally am in order to either affect 1 billion lives or make $1 billion. So my mindset there is I can't afford to stay the same if I'm going to do something gargantuan like that.
What's the greatest lesson you've ever learned, either in life or business?
Ooh. So now I hope you follow this train of thought, right? My daughter loves to pick flowers. She's always bringing them into the house. And I'm not going to lie, it gets on my nerves. I'm like, why do you keep bringing in rocks and wildflowers and all these other things into the house? She puts them in vases though. And I'm like, they're weeds. Like, you're bringing in dandelions. They're not that special. They're everywhere. So my wife and I we were having a discussion about wildflowers and weeds. And I was like, I think they're the same thing, but I'm not sure. So of course I did a Google search, and lo and behold, wildflowers and weeds are the exact same thing. So a wildflower is a flower that grows naturally in an environment. A weed is a wildflower that grows in an environment where human beings don't want them. So my perspective was like, oh, it's really all about how you look at things. So the greatest lesson that I've learned in that is that every situation can be seen from the lens of beautiful or horrific. Like it's either a dream scenario or a nightmare, but it's all about the perspective. Because when my daughter sees a field of dandelions and wildflowers, she sees a beautiful dreamscape to run around, frolic, and I see, oh man, let's get some weed killer and kill this thing. But it's the exact same thing. So everything in life that we go through, we can look at it from the lens of our perspective. And it's funny because the Bible kind of talks about that, right? Commit your work to the Lord and he will change the way you think about things. And that's what it's really all about, is like you choose whether you are grateful for the pain and the suffering or the hardships or even the good things. So many people are ungrateful even when good things happen to them, or you can be the opposite of that. And I'm going to choose to be grateful whether I'm going through a hard situation or a good situation. And it's completely changed the way that I see my life. And it completely changes the way my body responds to things. Right now my knee jerk to A stressful situation isn't, oh my gosh, my heart rate is like destroying me. It's, oh my gosh, this is a good opportunity to learn something. Let's do it. So it's really all about perspective, honestly. That's the thing that I've learned.
If you could offer one piece of advice to the world, what would it be?
Grow roots in people's lives. And that's actually the first section of the book I'm writing. Is if you want to do anything great in this life, remember that greatness is found in people. And when you grow roots in people's lives, you get so interconnected with them that you really start to see how human beings think, how they function, and you really get to tap into that groundwater, as I call it, which is that joint suffering with people. And when you suffer with people, it really starts to reveal things about yourself, your character really reveals things about people, and you can weather the storm. Like a tree that is planted and rooted deeply can withstand a drought, can withstand a hurricane, can withstand a frost, right? Because it's so embedded in the soil and the ground and the groundwater that it can resist the external issues. So if we can get so rooted in people's lives that external things don't affect us anymore, I think we're in a good place. My wife and I, we had 4 miscarriages, 3 before we had our daughter and 1 before we had our son. And those could have been situations that destroyed our marriage. That external pain could have easily destroyed our marriage. But we were so rooted in our faith and rooted in each other, and we allowed that suffering to actually help us dig deeper in each other and get closer, because pain and suffering is designed to draw us closer to each other, not the opposite. But we were invested in helping each other walk through that pain, walk through that suffering, that now 10 years later in marriage, where we just hit that mark, little external things don't affect us, right? Things that a lot of couples will look at and say, oh my gosh, that's a marriage killer. We look at that and we're like, that's not even that important. We've gone through the financial ups and downs. We've gone through all that stuff. And that stuff doesn't affect our marriage anymore. Why? Because we've gotten so rooted in each other and our lives, and we've gotten to the place where suffering is no longer a negative thing for us. Suffering is an opportunity to draw closer to each other, draw closer to God, draw closer to our kids, and really help each other walk through that journey. So I would say just grow roots with people. I think a major thing that bad leaders or managers do is whenever their employees or their coworkers or followers aren't meeting the standards, their knee jerk is, you have to go. I need to replace you. And it's back to that dandelion wildflower thing, right? Like, it's all about perspective. You can either see the person as an issue, or you can try to figure out where's the source of this issue. Instead, ask them what's going on. They might be going through a divorce. They might be going through like their child getting bullied at school. They might be going through some financial issues. You never know what might be affecting their work performance. And we always assume that somehow or another, we don't carry that outside world into work, but we do. I taught financial peace to my leadership team when I was at Leitersburg, because my philosophy is, if someone is dealing with financial issues at home, they're not going to bring their A game to work. And that wasn't just me coming out of the blue and being like, oh, it's there. I asked questions, I talked to them, I found out what is something that's on the heart of my people. So I grew roots with them, right? When my coworker came to me and said that he and his significant other had a miscarriage, because my wife and I had gone through it before, I was able to sit with him and we talked and we had open conversations, and he's still a friend of mine to this day. I learned not to run away from hardships. I learned not to run away from suffering. And for any leader, suffering and a lack of work effort might be an opportunity for you to tap into that person's life and really help them walk through. And on the other end of that, you have someone that is completely loyal to you. You have somebody that you're completely loyal to. You have somebody that, if push comes to shove in the work environment, they're always going to have your back. They're less likely to gossip, which is a cancer to any organization. They're less likely to leave for a couple of extra dollars here or there. and they really understand that you're honoring their time, which is something they will never get back, that they're exchanging for money that they can make anywhere. And most people would rather be with an employer that honors their time than just gives them a couple of extra dollars. Because when you give someone a raise, that doesn't last that long, right? Eventually, they bring their lifestyle to the level of that raise, and then it's a wash. So if we can honor people's time and grow roots with them and really learn them and really learn how to lead them from a relational level and put relationship over retaliation, then we start to really lead people in a healthy way that will grow further. So yeah, I think growing roots in people's lives is quintessential for a leader.
What do you want most for your life?
What I want most for my life, man, so many things swirl through my brain, but honestly speaking, my driving motivation in life is to leave something behind. And this may be the selfishness in me, or even the hubris in me, or maybe it's just my driving force, but I don't want to leave this earth without putting something out there, like I said before, that my kids can look back and say, yeah, he did that. He helped people. He changed lives. And again, it sounds selfish when it leaves my mouth, but I don't want my existence to be worthless. I want my existence to ripple on past me. We talk about all these historical figures, and I don't necessarily want to be famous, right? That's not what I'm asking for. What I really want is for that grassroots level of influence to keep going, where even if it's not my name attached to it, it's my mission that's attached to it. It's my message that's attached to it. I don't need credit for anything that I say. With my book, even if no one knows who wrote the book, but they are still influenced by the concepts in the book, that's good enough for me. And that's really what I want. And I want my children to be kind of the spearheads of that too, right? If I help the world, but my children are a disaster, I didn't do my job. If I help the world, but I leave my wife behind and I don't honor her and I don't build her up continually, then I failed there too. I guess it's a two-part driving thing, right? I want something that people can have of me, but I also want to make sure that my family feels led and honored and loved by me. So I guess those are my two driving forces.
That is quite a balancing act. I relate with it all too well, especially what you said about it doesn't matter if you change the world. If my wife, my marriage, my children are a wreck as a result, what's the point? Right? I think the most aligned people, the best people, in my humble opinion, are those that do honor their family, that they do honor their marriages, and that they set a good example there first, that who they are at home is who they are, despite what they're trying to show the world. Right? Yes, that is quite a balancing act. So I applaud you for thinking that way and reminding me of my own mission to do the same.
Yeah.
So,
and the thing is, I fail at that sometimes too. And we all do. And I would be an idiot to think that I would always do it the right way. I continually fail my kids. I continually fail my wife. But I try not to make the same mistake more than once. And if I do, I try to fix that as best as I can. But yeah, we're flawed, we're fallible. It happens, but I really want to make sure that my wife and kids know that I honor them and I love them. And that's also critical to me.
So I've asked you a lot of questions, Connell. Are there any final thoughts you want to share with us as we bring in this interview for a landing?
If you're going to fail somewhere, fail in relationships and work to build those up. If you're going to do anything, put your time and energy into relationships. That's what it boils down to. Every great business out there, when they do their marketing, they market relationships, but those are empty. As a leader, you can't market a relationship. You have to be in that relationship. So with your team, with your coworkers, with your leaders, focus on building a relationship. Focus on finding out what makes that person tick. Get to your shared interests, your shared experiences, but really focus on the shared suffering. And I know suffering is a very difficult word to hear, but going through life with people is the most beneficial thing you can do to your living experience. Because again, humans are designed for community, humans are designed for relationships. So why not, as a leader, focus on that and master the skill set that it takes to be a master of community? And also produce. No matter what goes on in your life, find a way to be productive, find a way to encourage people, find a way to leave something and put your stamp on it, because that's what's going to keep you out of depression and other mental health issues. And it's a wonderful life we live. It's a short life that we live. So why not take full advantage of that and do the things that we were designed to do: community and production.
I think that's a beautiful way to end our interview today. Connell, thank you so much for joining me today. The website for everyone is proceed2lead.com. Proceed2lead.com. Go there, check it out. It will enrich your life so much and enrich your leadership so much. So, Connell, thank you again. It was such a pleasure to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you, Mark. I had a great time.
Hey guys, thanks for watching and listening. Hit the subscribe button and you'll never miss an episode. And check out some of these other clips from the podcast.